I'm Dave Kirkpatrick, Executive Director of the REACH Alliance, a Pennsylvania statewide organization based in Harrisburg. REACH standing for Road to Educational Achievement Through Choice. And our main purpose is to achieve legislation making it possible for every citizen in Pennsylvania, every student and parent, to exercise what is a constitutional right of school choice, so determined by the U.S. Supreme Court unanimously in 1925. However, it's a right that if you can't afford to exercise it at the moment, and you might just as well not have it. It's currently available to people who have the resources. This is our third conference of this kind in 10 months. We've had people from literally all across the nation who have come here from Maine to California, both as speakers and as attendees. The opening speaker will be Jeanne Allen, who is the president of the Center for Education Reform, which she founded in Washington.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you. Good morning. I'm delighted to be here. I made it just in time, about 5 minutes before 10 from Washington, D.C. Always nice to come up here, however, and get into the real world. I'm sure you hear people say that all the time, but it is true. You immediately know you're in the real world when you stop at a gas station and someone says good morning to you once you're outside the Beltway. I'm delighted by what I see around the country right now. I'm incredibly optimistic. I run into people, particularly folks at the state and local level, who, because they're right in the middle of something, things aren't going well, they feel very pessimistic. Oh, when is it going to work? When is the dam going to break? I think the dam is breaking. There's never been a time before where you could wake up, as Sean showed you the New York Times headline today, Hartford invites private firm into their schools, despite the fact the city council is against it. Money's not the answer, says University of Rochester professor Eric Hanushuk, who once again released a book just last week, joined by 12 economists from around the country, very, very distinguished economists, in saying that yes, resources are not the answer. It's where the resources go. It's how they're spent. The problem is incentives. The problem is the system. You have things like that happening and people picking up on it. Houston mayor calls for charter schools and end deregulation. It's another headline you'll see. All across the country, you're reading about governors. What's on the plate of most of the gubernatorial candidates out there? Education reform. Mayors, legislators, you name it. The only people that seem to be on the opposite side of the issues are the status quo, are the unions for the most part, the blob, as Sean referred to it, which William Bennett first called them, the School Boards Association, the 144 some odd associations based in Washington who exist to perpetuate themselves. Make no bones about it, they exist for themselves. They don't know what the rest of the people around the country are doing. We meet teachers and school board members all the time who love reform. They love what's happening all over the country. They love school choice, the idea of charter schools, things like that. They have no clue what's going on in the association meetings. Lots of people have gone down to the NEA meeting, the School Boards Association. We've done the same thing. We've sent people down. And we're finding out just talking in the halls. We'll talk to a teacher at the union convention. She'll say, why did we spend 2 days on Rush Limbaugh and boycotting orange juice? My husband called me last night and wanted to know what the heck we teachers were doing down here. That's what's coming out of the conventions. And I think that's apparent throughout all of the country, but also throughout the communique itself. The organizations know that. And they're beginning to get on the defensive, and I think we're striking now, and it's even time to strike even harder. The other day I was at a small suburb outside of Washington, D.C. called Bowie, Maryland, and I went there to talk to a group that was organized by a local think tank. And next to me, talking right before me, was a gal named Verna Teasdale, who's a current school board member. She's been a school board member in Prince George's County for about 5 or 6 years. She's running for re-election. And she spoke prior to I did, and Verna told about how so many avenues exist for parents to get involved in the school system. There's mentoring programs. There's adopt-a-school programs. She went on and on and on. She had a laundry list, 10 things next to her. I kept looking at her little pad to see when she was going to stop, because I couldn't believe that she was actually sitting there and telling this intelligent audience that there were ways right now to get involved in the school system and make a difference. So she finished speaking, I did my spiel, and she had said towards the end of her discussion, there was only maybe 50 people there, the room could have clearly held 200. She said, one of the reasons that this room is not full right now, Verna Teasdale said, is because people do know things are working. And that's why we have to take comfort that there are ways in the current system, that we don't have to change it, et cetera, et cetera. So I couldn't resist. I said, Verna, the reason the room is not full is because of exactly what you just said. You've just told people there's nothing wrong here in Bowie, Maryland, or Prince George's County, so why should they show up? You're going around the entire state telling people there's nothing wrong, re-elect me. You can get involved the way it is, and you know that's nonsense. Well, she dismissed everything I had to say, sort of the global solutions, which is a key buzzword of theirs. Global, you're too global, you're not local enough, which is actually a lesson to be learned for us, which I'll talk about more in a minute. But I think the telling thing about Verna Teasdale is that is exactly what is working. Now, the people in the room, for the most part, when we started getting into debate about school choice and charter schools and the neat things happening around the country, how diverse the various movements were, how there were all these different things going at the same time but not necessarily connected, lots of good things happening, the people in the room started questioning her. Why aren't you on charter schools? Why aren't you on school choice? And a couple of people came up to me later and said, she's been a member of my parish all this time, and I'm not going to vote for her, because I can't believe what she just said. They were absolutely stunned. But nobody really had ever focused that or highlighted that issue. And the one thing that came across clear to me, most of you in this room know this, is the number one problem, the number one enemy facing us, facing reform, is apathy. It's not because we're bad parents. Parents are very busy. But by and large, it is very reassuring to hear that everything is fine in your neighborhood. And it's not that we should be going out and saying everything is rotten in your neighborhood, because then we get the reputation, as we normally do, and as the local papers will tell us and stuff, bashing public education, hates public education, only want private schools for their children. We get all these different colorizations about us out there, which are absolutely not true, but at the same time, we have to help people understand what the problem is. So throughout all of this, I think the first thing we need to be doing, if we're going to run a good movement, be part of a strong movement, and really help, not just here in Pennsylvania, but around the country, is we have to know our stuff. We have to be constantly talking about why it is we're doing what we're doing in a positive way, that we want true public education. That doesn't mean government education. That means public education. We want people educated. There will be all sorts of systems. There will always be a public education system. To talk about getting rid of it tomorrow is insane, because it's simply not going to go away. But we can offer people options and offer people choices and improve everything that's existing out there. And that is the way I propose to you today that we always talk about what we're doing out in the field, because that is the way that we are going to bring people with us, is if they follow us in a positive manner and they know that we're forwarding something good. I went to a conference once, actually not too long ago, and a woman who goes to a lot of these conferences stood up in the back of the room after someone had been talking about school choice and said, "I think everyone should have a Christian education." I wanted to shoot that lady. I've got to admit to you, I'm sorry, I'm passionate, I'm Italian, I'm from the Northeast, this happens to me. I was so angry because here we were in this room of 250 people or something. That might be her opinion, and that might be good for her, and she should have that right. But at the same time, that is exactly what separates us and what sometimes does hold us back from forwarding our debate, is that we try to throw our views on somebody else. And so what I think and what I'm interested in this movement for, why I'm involved in this and why the people I work with are, is because they believe that it truly is a populous country. This truly is a democracy, that there is no one best school for every child, that we simply have to work hard to make sure that those options are available. If someone tells me that my little son, who's right now in kindergarten, should be sent off to a school of 3,000 people and put on a bus every morning, no, I'm sorry, that's not for me. That might be for somebody else. But the point is, where I have the option to be able to send him to a local private school for kindergarten, somebody else can't. Now, recently, somebody gave me a bunch of different documents, and we get these from all over the country, people sending them in, things from the various unions and stuff like that. They see our stuff, why can't we see their stuff? So we do. And the NEA has had a number of different strategy conferences over the last several years about what exactly to do. As a matter of fact, Sean brought up to me recently, I'm sure most of you have seen it right now, a document that the Pennsylvania State Education Association put out talking about how they're on the defensive right now, that we're finding it harder to bring our friends in and harder yet to get other people who aren't yet our friends. Well, in the NEA strategy documents, it talks about making sure that in your community, if there is an effort alive, we make them be viewed as elitist, we make them be viewed as Catholic, and we make them be viewed as people who have more than everybody else. And right there is their full strategy in a nutshell. So what do we have to do? We have to answer those criticisms. If we're in an area where it might be difficult to talk about, perhaps everyone having school choice, maybe there's ways to do things. Maybe there's incremental measures that can be taken. It's going to differ from state to state. What some works in some states doesn't work in others. I suspect that is the reason right now we're having so much success around the country. What do I mean by success? 10 states in the last 2 to 3 years have enacted something called charter schools, which many of you are familiar with. This isn't something that a lot of us were sitting around one day and said, this is a great idea, we have to push charter schools. It happened. It was the most remarkable thing in the world. This is something thought up by a number of people. It was forwarded in that document that was given to President-elect Clinton from the Progressive Policy Institute a few years back. It's an idea to liberate public schools from the existing regulations, to free them up, to create autonomy for teachers, and to let people choose to go there. So within the course of a couple of years, 10 states adopt this. You have something like 63 schools out in California that are operating, a few in Minnesota, a couple are starting up in Michigan. All around the country as these programs get implemented, what is happening? They are being created, by and large, a majority of them, to focus on disadvantaged and low-income children. Not wealthy people, not just in the lily-white suburbs, they're focusing on disadvantaged kids. Why? Because there's a niche. And because good educators out there who want to be freed by the bureaucracy are taking it upon themselves to start these schools, going into partnerships with business, and making something happen. Why is that important for you here in Pennsylvania? Because the whole point of what we're here about today is breaking down the current system. Not the people, the current system. And anything that breaks down the current system is good. Because the current system right now does not help teachers, does not help children, does not give any authority to principals and school teachers. Many of you in this room who work for private schools know what you have, the benefits you have, that you trade in every day, sometimes for money, the lack of money, for lots of reasons. You don't have the short contracts that only let you work 8 hours a day. You work 12 to 15 hours a day. You want to. Other teachers around the country want to. Charter schools is bringing together people also from left and right, black and white, all the different social spectrums, in an effort to reform public education. It's selling, people support it, it's an important thing. It's an important thing that we look at the anecdotes coming out of it. Schools in California, for example, are closing with budget surpluses for the first time in their history. Public schools. These are public schools on performance contracts. No other public schools on a performance contract. When we're in our debates and we're talking to people, why don't we suggest, perhaps, that public schools go on a performance contract? That we do deregulation. You know, it's funny, we've been talking about deregulating the schools for a long time. And governors talk about it. And George Bush held an education summit in '89. All the governors said we've got to deregulate, and local schools talk about deregulating. And I picked up the paper a couple weeks ago, and Keith Geiger, the president of the NEA, is heralding the Committee for Economic Development, a business group in New York, and saying how proud he was that they finally came out to suggest deregulation. Meanwhile, Geiger's people are up on Capitol Hill and all the state capitals every single day lobbying for things to create that regulation. We've got to make that connection, though, for people. We've got to talk to them about why that was important. So there is progress being made. Charter schools are also being considered. I mean, I've heard at least 5 gubernatorial candidates talk about them. It's going to be considered this year in at least 10 states. Those are important things, because what it is showing us is that we are right. Things good happen in schools when they are freed up from oversight. What else is happening? 8 states at least are beginning or about to contract with private firms. Why is that important? Are we throwing the baby out with the bathwater? Are we turning our babies over to private enterprise like you'll hear so many people talk about? No. What it means is that school board members like those in Hartford, people around the country, are saying, you know, maybe we don't have all the answers. Maybe there's something we can do to help our schools. Maybe if we cut out the management stuff that we have to do, we'll have more time to focus on the kids. Is it going to change things overnight? No. Is it going to really result in improved achievement for kids, this kind of contract out private firms? No, not really. It's going to improve the morale a little bit, it's going to improve the way things work, and it's going to give people in the school system a glimpse of what can happen if you start breaking out of the current shackles, of the current structure of bureaucracy. It whets their appetite. It's the same thing as choice. Whether you're talking about charter schools or privatization, you're whetting people's appetite. One of the biggest lessons we learned, I know you all had a conference a few months ago and talked about this, but one of the biggest lessons I think we learned from Proposition 174 in California, the school choice initiative out there, and from Colorado and Oregon before it, is that people don't understand what we're talking about. They don't. They don't think about school choice. You hear, I mean, even people, for example, in my own direct circle of friends that know what I do for a living, and I bring up school choice and say, oh yeah, that's interesting. I say, explain that to me again. They even send their kids, some of them send their kids to private school. Would you explain that again? How does that work? Now, what would that do to the school that loses the kids? They don't get it. It's too radical for them. It's not too radical to push as a reform. But the idea itself, unless we start using terms that they understand, it hurts us. And so what came out in a recent poll, for example, there was a most far-reaching poll done in California from the outset, or the aftermath of the Prop 174, we actually lost after Prop 174. We actually lost 10% of the people who actually supported us because it was unclear. Yes, did money and the unions and all that other stuff help do that? Of course it did. You know, they spent millions, we spent 1 million. They were organized, we were not organized. All those things contribute, but even the proponents say if they had $20 million, they wouldn't have been able to win out there. It was too much, too soon, too fast. And we had lots of people with sort of these vague faces walking around talking about it. We had lots of white males. I don't mind white males. I'm married to one. I have 3 of them at home. Don't get me wrong, okay? But we had lots of them all over the cameras and stuff. Well, why does that impress me? If I'm sitting there and I'm a businessman and there's a guy espousing something I like, why does that impress me? We are not making people feel what this is about. Instead, we should be bringing children to legislators and let them talk to children. Let them see the diversity of kids that this is about to affect. We should be talking about different things like that. Instead, there are a bunch of people talking. Mostly we ignored the essential issue, which was to help kids. We'd get involved in how much does it cost financially, or what competition does. People don't listen to the word competition and marketplace. That doesn't make any sense for them unless they're looking at the Dow Jones Industrial Average. So we have to talk about human things. We have to make it human. We have to share stories with people. I've been in meetings the last few weeks and during my tenure in education reform, and every meeting I go to, people keep coming out and saying, you know, we have to make ourselves more human. We have to talk to people about what's happening. I submit to you that the places things are happening because they're happening at the local level. There are things people can understand. They look and they feel right, and they're taking place with real people. The Verna Teasdales of the world is who we have to talk about, as opposed to what competition does, or induct the name of Milton Friedman. I mean, who cares what Milton Friedman says? I love him. He's a great book, but it doesn't matter to any of us out here. The real people don't even listen to that. What's happening elsewhere around the country in school choice? School choice is very important. Obviously, it's integral. School choice is the only thing that's going to get us any place because it is the catalyst to all other reforms. It is not the thing itself that does it. It is the catalyst. It starts the things going in learning and management and teaching. It is that essential focus that we need if anything is going to really change drastically. As I said, all these things are little incremental steps. They all help. We should be praising them. We should be encouraging our local communities as well as our state to do things. But the real essential thing is school choice as much and as soon as possible. But we're not going to get necessarily lots of it tomorrow. In the meantime, lots of neat things are happening around the country that are building. They're having sort of a very related effect from California to Pennsylvania. Last year, you had 2 or 3 near misses. And I mean really close. One in Connecticut of a school choice / charter school bill was considered by a bipartisan group. The Democratic majority leader in Connecticut led this group of bipartisan legislators to only fail by a tie vote, 71-71 in the House, for a limited school choice measure that would have been a local option, would have allowed any community in Connecticut to decide whether or not they wanted to enact a school choice. But it had to be a low-income pilot project to start out with. This was so modest, but yet such a path-breaking experiment that so many people were willing to get on board. You had the mayor of Hartford coming out. You have the mayor of Waterbury coming out. City councils across the state were coming out saying, yes, this is something we want. But it was only in the nth hour, after they dragged out the legislature for weeks and tired them out, and a couple of them actually that would have voted for it didn't show up at the Capitol that day, that they lost by 71-71 vote. That's remarkable. 5 years ago, we wouldn't have never made it that far. Arizona, similar thing. Arizona, after a prolonged 3-month battle between, it was fairly high-charged and partisan, but between members of the Education Committee and members of the legislature itself, dealing with the idea of school choice and should we enact it maybe for 3 districts, and they limit it to a pilot project for 2,000 kids. That didn't even go over, but it only failed by 1 vote. It got out of the committee, it went to the House floor, it failed by 1 vote. They ended up going back to the legislature for a special session, enacting charter schools. The people there vowed to come back again. They had business. The major states' major businesses in Arizona were pushing school choice for low-income kids, a demonstration project. They said, how can we go wrong? It's similar to what's been happening in Milwaukee. Now, Milwaukee, almost 1,500 kids have been taking advantage of a school choice measure there since 1991 when Polly Williams enacted the voucher plan, with the help of Tommy Thompson there. Things are good are happening. You know, the jury's been out for a long time, quite frankly. It's a wonderful experiment to talk about because good things are happening at a subjective level, but it's not until recently we've actually been able to see what's happening with test scores. And what they find out is the kids most immediately in the program are not doing any better or any worse than they were the year before. But the kids who have been in the program 2 or 3 years are doing remarkably better. Now why? Because it is a sudden change. People say to me, I was on a radio show debating one of the guys from Wisconsin once, and he said, see, they're not doing any better, why don't you just send them back? What does that mean? You take a child out of a public school system where he's been all of his life, put him into a private school system, what is it, it's like jump up and all of a sudden become a national merit scholar the next day? That doesn't happen. You know, and the minute you say that to them, they don't know what to say, as opposed to we normally throw back facts. I think that's another thing we can be doing, is throw back to them. Go meet the kids. You should hear about them. You know, read as much as you can. These kids are wonderful, and they're happy, and their parents say things like hell, I'm going to send them back to the public school, because it is working, and it's beginning to wear away at the system. Now, it's only 1,500 kids, so a group of business leaders there, as well as the mayor, who's a Democrat, Mayor Norquist in Milwaukee, and a whole bunch of different kinds of folks are getting together, and they're going to try to expand the Milwaukee program to include parochial schools and to include every low-income child in Milwaukee. Tommy Thompson, supposedly, so far has given his support for it, and he's under election right now, and he'll win, but it depends on the governor to a large extent, and he'll probably put it in his budget proposal. That's a real possibility for the next year. Likewise, Connecticut is going to come back, and that's a real possibility for this year. Texas, a couple of years ago, lost a small pilot project again by 1 vote. Democratic Hispanic legislator came out of nowhere. This wasn't organized conservative support, organized Catholics, nothing. It was just, he introduced a measure, said to the Republican one day on the floor of the House, hey, you know, I've heard you guys talking about school choice before. I really think this is important. My Hispanic guys are getting left out in Texas. Let's do something. I mean, it was that casual. And they put in a bill, and in a couple of days they had it drafted, they put in a bill, and it missed by only 1 vote. And that's with no work done. I mean, that's with no one, you know, getting their ducks in a row. So these kinds of things are out there and happening. Now, a lot of people I talk to, this is the one downside, I think, of our effort. A lot of people I talk to say, oh, well, it's only a small pilot project. That's not good enough. Yes, it is good enough. It's very good. These incremental changes are very good, because just as we look at public school choice, for example, what started in Minnesota that a lot of us wanted to dismiss years ago, we said it's not real choice, it doesn't include private schools, it doesn't expand the options available to all kids. You're right. But in Minnesota and East Harlem and all those things you're probably sick of hearing about now, remarkable things happened. Teachers and parents and students, as well as doing better than they were before, started liking the idea of having freedom. And freedom, even in small doses, is better than freedom, no freedom at all. And so in Minnesota, when you look at the fact that 20,000 dropouts return to the classroom, and they're also attending, by the way, not only other public schools besides the ones they attended, but private schools that qualified. As a matter of fact, Minnesota just recently certified St. Bernard's High School, a Catholic school, to be a recipient for remedial education funds for any dropouts coming back to the classroom. It's being challenged right now, but that's in there. And the Minnesota education establishment, they're basically ignoring it. Why? Because 85% of people in Minnesota support the program in Minnesota right now. Whereas when the public school choice program passed, again, something modest, nobody has to shake themselves up, move communities, anything unless they wanted to at the time, less than 30% of the people support it, less than 30% of the teachers' unions. Now everyone is in agreement. And this is a good thing. It's one of these things, you can't fight it. I mean, even if the opponents, the NEA and stuff, went to Minnesota and said, we don't like this, I mean, they're going to get shot down. This is good. This is something working. It's happening. So a little bit of freedom is better than none at all. In New Jersey right now, many of you know, and many of you were there last week for a rally, Mayor Brett Schundler is pushing a school choice plan. It's a little bit of trouble. The governor's not sure what she wants to do. There's lots of forces at play, you know, all the little gremlins that come out at night, you know, when we're not looking and start challenging what's happening. But the remarkable thing about Jersey City is you've got an incredible district, just full of people who want this kind of freedom, full of people who want school choice, that want to push something. And Schundler, if there's anybody around, somebody like a Mayor Schundler could probably make this work if he puts together the right kinds of coalitions, if he builds support in the right areas. And the legislators are increasingly getting pressure from the grassroots there to make something happen. Will it happen this fall? No. Will it happen in the winter? I don't know. Maybe not. There's a lot of things that have to happen. But that's another area. And the fact that the unions are coming out, they're building support. You know, at the NEA convention this year, they voted between $500,000 and $1 million to target New Jersey alone. They're doing that in every area. Don't, I mean, the minute you look around your back and think, well, things are sort of comfortable, don't get comfortable at all. Because they're out there and they're coming at you. They're also coming at you with things all across the country, like you've heard this, almost my Verna Teasdale example before, the school board member, everything in public education is okay. Again, you can't let down your guard. They're in Pennsylvania, they're in California, they're in Michigan. They're pushing out people. Gerald Bracey's one of them, who's a former NEA analyst that was actually fired by the NEA. He was so objectionable. And he goes around saying things like SAT scores aren't really bad. You know, the National Assessment of Educational Progress is really pretty good compared to most things. I mean, he takes every single fact and he twists it for his own benefit. The NEA is hosting people like that. They're spending lots of money to send him around, despite the fact they fired him. It's sort of an interesting twist. Anyway, what does all this mean? It's good for public education, what's happening. All across the country, it's good for public education. In Michigan, with the charter schools happening there. In Florida right now, education reform and school choice is the key issue between the gubernatorial candidates. Mayor's races, as I said before. We're getting smarter. What does it mean that we're tying here and tying there? Oh, well, we're not winning. You know, should we go home? No, we're learning from our mistakes. We're realizing what we have to do to make something win. Our ideas are good. They are the truth. They are the best ideas you've got out there. We know that. It's a matter of selling them. We can't stand up any longer and say parental choice is right. Parents' rights, that's important. All that is wonderful. All that is very important. Don't get me wrong. But it is selling it. You and I can know that in here, but it's selling it and making people understand it. And don't just sell it to people who might normally agree with us or who are easy to sell. There are teachers out there that want to be sold on this issue. There are school board members out there that are incredibly frustrated. There are people all over this country who you don't normally think of. And just the examples I gave you of what was happening in the last year and what is about to happen in the next year, 1995, you're going to see 4 or 5 states start considering more of these things that will become the pinnacle point in their debate, whether it's in the education committees or on the floor itself. It's because you've got Democrats suddenly in the mix. It's because you've got more than just white people in the mix. It's because you've got people of all different incomes in the mix, all different ages. It's a very diverse group of people, and where we have the diversity and we put together the coalitions, we will win. If we tell the stories right, if we introduce our case right, if we use the information that organizations like REACH and PLC in our states and things like that provide us with every day, we are going to make that kind of contact. I mean, remember wherever you go, that there are things happening and that you've got to get out there, you've got to stump for it even more, but it's got to be beyond your own intimate community. It's got to be beyond there. And throw out the stats, throw out the headlines, know your stuff. You know, Pennsylvania hit the national, obviously the national news because of the OBE debate a little while ago. It's back. It's back in every form. It keeps coming back to haunt us. Outcome-based education is here. Remind people, though, that outcome-based used to be our term. Standards are good. Academic standards are good, but OBE is the hijacking of standards, if you will. And we have to remind people that because one of the things that is going to hurt us, as just some of the things I've said, we'll get calls, for example, from some people. A gal in Kentucky called us recently and said, OBE is coming here, what do you have for us? Or OBE is here. I said, well, no, wait a minute, what do you mean by OBE? Well, there's a standards bill. Okay, now what's in the standards bill? The standards bill was actually not bad. It's the machinations it can take. It's what happens to it once it gets in the hands of the experts. But we have to be just as much about standards and the survival of education, whether it's public or private, although we should use the term public to apply to all of our schools. Everything is public education. And you're going to hear from Charles Glenn later, who I'm a big fan of. And he talks about in all of his books and all of his writings, Horace Mann and the myth of the common school. You know, public education is what we are striving for, and we're striving for standards. So whether it's called standards or OBE or something else, let's make sure that we don't do what our opponents do. Let's make sure we always find the truth, because we can't be sloppy. They'll be looking for us. Thank you. Across the country, there are private scholarship programs in place. It was something we started with Pat Rooney in Indianapolis several years back. Actually, there had been one in Boston and New York before that, where businessmen, entrepreneurs are stepping up and saying, I want to help low-income children. I'm going to give them half of what the local private school on average costs. And they can meet the rest of the difference. They have to be at the poverty level or below. They can meet the difference, and they can go to these schools. Today, there are over 8,000 kids in 17 cities participating in a private school plan. People at the poverty level, low-income people are stepping up saying, I will find the money. Whether it's $800 they're getting in Indianapolis or $1,300, which they're getting in southern Los Angeles, they're finding that money by hook or by crook. Or they're trading it in, they're bargaining. Private schools are saying, come volunteer, come work. Can you work from 6 to 8 in the morning? Can you do this? Can you do that? To make it happen. And the schools are opening up, they're accepting the tuition, they're also accepting help. What does that show us? We've been in focus groups, we've been other things. Low-income people, of course they want the full tuition. Of course we all need it and deserve it in a sense. But at the same time, number one, those programs are happening because of the benevolence of private people. But in school voucher programs and plans and proposals around the country, we haven't made so much headway yet that a legislator is going to accept a full funding plan, even a friendly legislator, when you can't balance where the money is going and how you're going to get the rest of the money. In other words, if you have a net loss of children from a public school to a private school, you don't suddenly lose all the costs in the public school. So money has to stay behind in order for that legislator to think in his mind, this is going to make sense for my district. So the voucher programs are based on, whether it's $1,000 or $2,000, they're usually based on half to three-quarters of what a private school in that area costs. You know, the voucher in California was going to be worth $2,500. The actual state average was somewhere between $3,000 and $3,500. The New Jersey one, the average tuition, he says, there is $1,800 to $2,200. So you have to come up and get something. The other thing being, there are some people, and I think I'm one of them, who believe that if someone has their own purchasing power, in addition to the voucher, if money had to come out of their pocket, they're going to make it a better deal than it normally would be. They're going to be more involved. They're going to think about it more. It won't become the public school system. You won't suddenly sit back and say, well, I got my voucher, I turned it over. They're in charge. It's your money. You know, you're going to think about it much, much more. If I pick, you know, if I go out and I start choosing a soccer clinic for my son and I've got to pay for it, how come I'm always wanting him to be there and I want him to do well? And you want to do things. You know, parents are sitting around talking about, picking piano lessons, whatever it is. You think about it, you're so much more concerned about that than what's going on in your child's public school every day. So even when you switch it to a private school, you want to make sure someone's got something. But I think you've got the problem of economics, you've got the problem of politics, and you also have the evidence that people will try to choose something and will have enough options available to them, even if they're given a little bit.